Good morning, Southern California, AM 1220 KHTS. Host Fred Arnold in the Santa Clarita Valley Chamber of Commerce Business Spotlight. This is our LINC interview, linking individual network connections with Samantha Marcus and James Gomez, who happens to be sick today.
Yeah, it's very unfortunate.
Your co-host.
We miss you, Jake.
Yeah, so you're going to have to pinch hit for him. He's probably watching us Facebook Live on KHTS.
Yes.
Samantha Marcus is an AP and honor student at West Ranch High School and vice chair of the Wildcats Against Cancer are for a cause. So welcome to the show.
Thank you.
And let's talk about LINC. It's a show that interviews business professionals, professionals of different talents and industries to expose high school students to what they could potentially get as a job.
Right.
Yeah. So let's Paula K. Allen, our first guest.
Yes, we have a great guest today. Her name is Paula Allen. She is the founder and principal agent of Screenland LA. She is a publishing executive with over 2 decades of experience in developing and managing publishing business units and representing authors. Her specialties are literary representation, contract negotiation, business planning, strategy, and management of intellectual properties. Screenland is partnered with A&E Networks, Cartoon Network, the History Channel, and NBC, to name a few. Prior to being at Screenland, Paula was the Senior Vice President Global Publishing at Nickelodeon Consumer Products, where she oversaw the Nickelodeon brands, generating over $40 million in licensing revenues for the company. Prior to that, she was at Warner Brothers Entertainment, where she was responsible for helping generate over $77 million in licensing revenue, equivalent to $1 billion in retail sales of Warner Brothers books and magazines worldwide. She also worked in the corporate office at Barnes & Noble. She is a graduate of Western Washington University with a Bachelor of Arts degree from the School of Communications and Journalism. So we have a great guest today. Thank you, Paula Allen, for being here.
Thanks, Fred. Thanks, Samantha. I'm happy to talk with you today.
Thank you. So our first question to you is, like I just said, you received a degree in communications and journalism. How did you choose your major? Did you want to be a writer? Was this always an interest to you?
Well, yes, it was. I was always a reader, and I loved books, and I really enjoyed writing, but I wasn't a creative writer. I was a journalistic writer, and so I was working closely on my college campus, working with their daily broadcast, and so I was writing news for the on-campus television station. It was a lot of fun.
Wow, that's great. And so we know that your job is when you see manuscripts and you're trying to get them published and you send them to places. So is it frustrating for you to see these great manuscripts not get published? Like, for example, J.K. Rowling got turned down by multiple publishers, and then now you see how successful she is. So how does that make you feel when you see a great manuscript get turned down?
Well, as a literary agent, my job is to match authors with publishers. And so I get to know all the publishers and all the different editors that work at publishing companies, and most editors have their own style. Some editors like very funny books, for example, and other editors like just science fiction, and other editors like very poignant and emotional and dramatic books. And I think that one of the things that I bring to the table when working with an author is I read their work, and then I try to think about, okay, who do I know within the publishing industry that likes books like this? Is this a funny novel, or is it a mystery? And then which editors within the publishing community are looking for that type of work? So it's really about matchmaking, trying to match an author with an editor or a publisher who really loves the work as much as I do as an agent.
Wow, that's great. And you were just talking about reading. So I understand my mom told me that you really enjoy reading. Do you really have to love reading to do your job? Like, I'm not an avid reader, but if I wanted to take on your profession, would I need to really enjoy reading?
I think you would need to enjoy it, and because you spend a lot of time reading manuscripts. Writers send me all different types of manuscripts all the time, and you have to go through them to figure out which ones are professionally written enough to be represented. And you have to talk books all the time with the editors that you reach out to. You know, editors for the most part are big readers themselves, and so they will want to talk books with you. What are their favorite books? What books have you read? So I do believe that for this particular profession, you should probably be, you know, in love with the reading as a form of entertainment. It certainly would make it easier if you did.
So I'm curious, Paula, Fred Arnold, wanted to ask you, some people listening to this are going to be inspired because they want to actually be the writer, and they want
Sure.
to pitch ideas and thoughts to someone like yourself. Do they go through a coaching program, or would they come directly to you? Do they go to school for it? Because you're probably taking a lot of information of aspiring authors that maybe aren't polished, but have a creative concept or idea or thought on a book.
Absolutely. And, you know, you need to be a professional writer. That doesn't necessarily, by professional, I don't mean you need to be a published writer, but I mean you need to really understand the craft of writing and storytelling, whether you're writing a piece of fiction, you know, an original novel, or you're writing nonfiction, telling the story of someone's biography or a bit of history. You really need to hone your craft, and so I always recommend that people take as many writing and English classes as they possibly can, and to write all day long. Write everything down, write it, rewrite it, write it again, to really sharpen your skills as a wordsmith.
Wow, that's great. And I want to shift the topic over to networking. So I've been networking for the past few years, and I think it's something that's really valuable. Do you think that most jobs nowadays come from networking? I know in my mom's generation, when she would apply for a job, you'd send in a resume. Would you say that sending in a resume is kind of obsolete now, and it really depends on networking?
Yes and no. It kind of depends upon what job you're going after. I think at the executive level, at the the senior management level of most companies, networking and knowing your industry and the people in your industry is very important. But I think when you're just getting started, you know, you need to get that break and jump into whatever business, whether it's publishing or business or banking or economics, whatever industry you're getting into. I do think having a resume or a CV that you can show someone is important, because it also lends to your character and your experience, and how hard you're willing to work, you know, at your new job. So networking is very important, but I think when you're just getting started, it's having a resume and getting out there and applying is just as important as knowing someone, and, you know, as it would be if you're trying to get an executive job.
Very true. And going back to what you do, what types of books have you gotten published? What can you tell our listeners about the kind of books that you've been able to get published?
Well, most of my career has been in the children's industry, and I have been working in and publishing kids' books for many, many, many years, both as a literary agent and when I worked at Warner Brothers and at Nickelodeon. And so I love children's books, and I spend a lot of time reading kids' books, and it's just a really fun category to work in. I also have published adult books, some adult fiction books and some nonfiction books and inspiration books. So I've really run the gamut of all types of publishing.
Paula, Fred Arnold, curious where you think the market for written materials going with so much on video blog and blogging and so much on the internet. Do you see it being more of a specialty, a complement of video blogs? Do you find books written and then video blogs that talk about it to accentuate the book? Where do you see the market going with what's happening with the internet?
Well, I think that the internet is just another way for people to get stories. I feel like people always want to either read a good story or watch a good story on TV or podcast a good story that they can listen to, or even on an audiobook listen to a great story. And I think that humans in general love to hear great stories. And it may be changing. The industry is changing with blogging and how they get their stories. People can go on YouTube and watch a great story. You can go on Netflix and watch a great story. Or you can pick up a book and read a great story, whether you're reading on a device like a Kindle or a Barnes & Noble Nook or your phone or the original ink on paper method. It's all about getting stories, and people want to be entertained with their stories. And so I see it as an expansion of the storytelling world. And it doesn't really bother me that maybe it's taking eyeballs away from ink on paper, because it's just fueling humans' need to get a great story.
I actually never thought about it that way, so that's very interesting.
It's almost like it accentuates.
Yeah,
the book.
I think it does.
Fred,
I think you're absolutely right. I think it creates, it fuels the person into wanting more stories. It's like listening to a radio show. You want to hear more, and I think that it all just lends itself to the need for more stories in our lives.
That's very true. So you've had a tremendous amount of experience, and you have such a great career, and I was personally wondering, do you have any personal success stories or stories that were so impacting to you about your career that you'd like to share with the listeners?
Wow, gosh, that's
deep.
That's deep.
Samantha's going deep today.
Wow. Well, I actually have a story that my granddad, from my grandfather, and this is when I was just kind of starting out, and my grandfather was a civil engineer working in Dallas, Texas, and he designed green spaces and golf courses for the city of Dallas. And I love him to pieces. He passed away a long time ago, but I was just out of college and trying to decide what I wanted to do, and my grandfather said, whatever it is you decide to do, leave good tracks. And I was like, leave good tracks? What does that mean? I don't understand that. And he said, well, you're going to have a lot of jobs in your life, or you're going to be asked to do a lot of different things. But whenever you leave one thing and move on to another thing, whether you're leaving school and moving on to a career, or you're leaving one company for another company, he said, leave good tracks. And I listened to him. I didn't fully understand what he was talking about at first, but now, after so many years in publishing, I have a database of friends in my industry and colleagues and people that I've worked with for many, many, many years. And I think the Leave Good Tracks message that was so inspirational for me really meant that don't burn any bridges. Try to stay in touch with everybody. Be friendly with everyone. Be a good colleague, and develop and foster those relationships, even if you're leaving that industry, because you never know where someone else is going to land, and it's good to have friends everywhere. So I'd have to say that Granddad's message to me way back was very inspirational and spot on.
Wise.
Yes, thank you for that. That was so inspiring to us.
Yeah, sometimes you find, even in high school, that some of the people you might think about discounting because of our immature nature of high school, if you will, we might be working for that person. You
right.
know? Or they might be our leader, or they might save our life one day. And that's a great testimony. Yeah. Yeah.
You're absolutely right, Fred. It is, even if you have challenges because you're a teenager and, your high school environment may not be great, you're going to live through it, and you're going to move on, and then the next thing you know, you're going to see those high school friends at your 10th anniversary or 10th, high school reunion.
Or your 30th.
Or your 30th, as the case may be. And everyone, it's important to be professional. You don't have to love the person that tormented you in high school, but you can certainly be civil and professional and genuine in your relationship with them.
Yeah.
That's so true. Well, thank you so much for being on the air with us today, Paula Allen, who's the founder and principal agent of Screenland LA. We are very delighted to have been able to talk to you. Thank you so much.
Well, you're welcome. It's very nice to talk to you both this morning, and I really appreciate it.
You're making a difference in a lot of kids' lives, and we really appreciate you taking the time out of your day. Thank you.
Yeah,
All
thank
right.
you.
Thanks so much, Fred. Thanks, Samantha.
Absolutely. Ladies and gentlemen, Samantha Marcus with LINC. Hope Jake gets better for next week or next month's show.
Yeah, Jake, get better.
Yeah, get better, Jake Gomez. But until next month, I hope you enjoyed this edition of The LINC, the Linking Individual Network Connections, helping students find their passion when they go to college and all you do. Thanks, Samantha.
Thank you so much.
Absolutely. Hope you enjoyed this edition of the Santa Clarita Valley Chamber of Commerce Business Spotlight. I'm your host, Fred Arnold, on AM 1220 KHTS.